Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So I won't be doing a review, sort of my thoughts thing on like every game that I play. The main reason I wanted to do it for this one was I put like 50 hours or so into this game, which I normally wouldn't have done, but there's a lot of like extra modes and things that I wanted to do. And also because this means I'm finally done with the main games in the Pikmin series, and I thought, so this is kind of like a mix really of like talking about Pikmin 4 but also kind of comparing it to the other games and talking about the other games a little bit. But I think it'll mostly be about Pikmin 4. So this isn't going to be titled like a video on all of them or whatever. The only one I still need to play, because I even play the mobile game now. This game actually got me back into it. The only one I still need to play is the 3DS one, Hey Pikmin, which I had played the demo of, I think after I'd played Pikmin 1 or something. It was okay. I don't know if I'll ever play it. Maybe I'll try to get it at some point. I don't know. I'm kind of actually Pikmin'd out at the moment, so it's nice that this is the last one. Let me talk about a little bit with the other games first, and then I'll start kind of talking about Pikmin 4. I'll kind of lead my way in there. Just as like a recap of my thoughts on those two. First game's pretty good. I feel like it's one of the shorter ones. I think 3 was probably the shortest though, because I do like the whole thing of getting the ship parts, the 30 parts 30 days thing, though it could be a bit stressful. I think just because of the way the game's designed. I remember the enemies in that game being kind of tough. It's also the game where it's just Olimar. There's no other form of like a second captain. I mean, 4, you technically have one captain, but you can use Ochi as like a second captain and do a lot of like multitasking that way of like being able to play as Ochi. So I feel like 1 is kind of the only one where it's just Olimar, which makes, in like a gameplay stance, it makes things a bit harder because you can't just like order on the map, like go over here. You have to like walk everywhere, babysit the Pikmin. I remember the Pikmin themselves being like a little stupid in this game, where they would get like stuck behind walls or stuck behind things where it's like you really have to kind of baby them and keep, I mean, every Pikmin game you kind of have to keep an eye on them so they don't die, but I remember them getting behind like walls and other stuff where they wouldn't follow you or whatever. I think the ship parts, like in 2, the treasures were like my favorite in terms of the collectibles, you know, because there's treasures, there's ship parts, there's fruit throughout the series. But what I liked with the ship parts, even though it was kind of annoying, you have to collect them all to like get a good ending. But they're not, a lot of them aren't actually needed for Olimar's ship to function or anything, but I liked that whenever you collected them, and I wish this was something they brought back in like the other games. It would have been cool to have in 4 for a lot of the treasures or something, or the mode in 4 where you like play as Olimar and you have to collect his ship parts, because it's basically like a shorter version of the first game, is that you'd collect a ship part and then there would be a little pop-up that would basically give you the blurb on like the information, and the first game was cool with like the vibes if you learn about like Olimar's family, and it's just you on this alien planet. You feel very alone, having to rely on the Pikmin. There's constantly like the looming thought of death, in a sense of, oh, if I don't get these parts, Olimar's gonna die. And especially the whole thing of, if you get the bad ending, the Pikmin put Olimar into the ship and he ends up sprouting a leaf on his head and he's like dead basically, which it's crazy like mentioning some of those things after having played 4, because 4, if you compare it with the first game, has like such a different vibe, where it's like it's not just one person on this alien planet anymore. There's like there's a whole rescue corps and all the people that you rescue, so it actually feels very lively to the point where you have like a home base you just get to like chill at. You don't you don't have like a time limit when you're there, so it actually feels pretty chill. You don't really feel alone, even when you're like wandering around, like, you know, in the world and stuff. You still have Ochi, and then you always have some of the other rescue corps members on the communications at all time. Even when you're just running around, they'll sometimes say things and whatever, so you never really feel alone, which I like that. But I kind of missed for that in the first game, that feeling of like being alone. It is really just you and the Pikmin against everyone else. And also the whole thing of like the first game having that bad ending, and then they turn it into like an actual part of the plot in 4 of like Olimar gets put in an onion, and this time he becomes a whole creature, the leaflings, and then having to rescue everyone else turned into a leafling, and that being like the driving force of the plot and everything. And also I remember from talking to the characters in 4 where they said like, oh, as a leafling they're just constantly obsessed with Dandori, they don't even know why, or like the whole thing of yeah, we don't know why the ship crashed, but it's like the planet's kind of luring people in a sense and kind of making them crash, just despite the fact like with the first game Olimar crashes, you know, the meteor and stuff, but then even like the rescue corps in 4, like they talk about how they have this fantastic pilot, Bernard, and then they still ended up crashing. So no wonder there's so many crashes in this I think 2 is like the only one where you don't crash or something. But yeah, 1's a little bit stressful. I feel like 2's the most stressful game like overall, but 1 is definitely a bit stressful. Those ship parts I remember definitely Google to see where they were, but it's still cool. It's kind of nice, you know. I didn't expect with this series that Olimar was going to be in like every single game. I'm actually, by the time I got to the 4th game, I was getting like a little tired of Olimar. I like him as a character, and it's nice that Louie's there too, because like you go attached to him in the first game, and then the second game it's just kind of him and Louie, and then by 3 and 4 you have new main characters, which I like. But then not only is Olimar still part of the plot, I like that in 3 he isn't actually there that much. You end up finding him at the end where he's like kidnapped by the final boss, and you end up finding Louie first, and Louie's there for like a little bit, but it's mostly focused on like the 3 captains. But then in the deluxe one you still have the mode to like play. Olimar's I guess like always playable, of finding doing the little missions as Olimar. And then with the 4th game, Olimar's kind of more relevant, where not kidnapped by the final boss this time, but you're just sort of following him around as that leafling, and it's like very obvious he's the leafling, which is funny. And then you finally get to cure him, and then I actually like that he ends up being sort of part of your team and getting dialogue throughout the story rather than just kind of being there. And then once you save him, you have that opportunity to do the Olimar mode, as I call it. I want to talk about that for a second. I thought that, since I was talking about the first game, I thought that was pretty cool. Like 4 I consider like a sequel to 2. I'll talk about that in a bit as well. But I like that mode of Olimar's shipwreck tale or whatever is basically like a shorter and easier version of the first game. It reminds me of like with Kirby, where they have Spring Breeze and Superstar that's basically like the entirety of the first game. I actually always like when games do that, where they'll basically like remake an older entry but like shorter, and it'll be like its own little mode, and it's usually like easier too because it's like on a newer game, newer mechanics and stuff. I always find that fun. And it's crazy, I was originally going to do that Olimar's Tale, I'll just call it. I was gonna do that like at the end of the game. I thought it was like the 3rd game where it's like you do one thing as like Olimar when you unlock it, and then you have to wait till after the final boss to like continue with it, because you're just kind of seeing like what Olimar's going throughout the story. So I thought it was like that, and then I had read for the 4th game like, oh, if you want the white and purple onions you got to go through Olimar's whole thing, and I'm like, oh shit. And at first I got like really stressed out when I tried doing it. What was nice, because I mentioned in my playthrough I used a guide. The only thing I ended up doing, I mean, I looked up where the onions were, but I literally just pulled up a numbered map of where all the ship parts were, and that's it. I didn't like further read through the guide to see like exactly where things were. I just kind of put a bunch of pins on my map, and I think that was a good system for me, because then I wouldn't have to be like super stressed checking like every single corner to find the ship parts. I didn't want to do that to myself. but then I was able to explore and find them on my own. So that, I think that was a good way for me to do it. I don't know how other people do it, but it's actually a pretty nice mode. It's like a little stressful in the first two worlds, the Terrace and the Blooming Arcadia, because you don't really have a lot of Pikmin yet and ways to get a lot of the parts. But I felt like, because it's only the first four areas in that mode, once you get to Serene Shores and like if you've been like collecting more of those Farlick onions and stuff, then it just gets like pretty easy and actually really fun at that point, just running around getting the ship parts. So I appreciated having that mode. It was actually really fun. I probably shouldn't have done so much of it in one sitting. I'm not kidding. I did that for 5 hours straight. And then the next morning I finished it, and I finished Hero's Hideaway. And I like that there's no like grand final boss for it or anything. Like one of the last bosses you fight in it is the man at legs. You fight it on top of like a kitchen countertop or something. But it's still like pretty easy and stuff. But yeah, that whole mode was fun. Yeah, it probably takes people an even shorter amount of time. For me, it took around like 5 hours or so. Because I originally didn't want to do it. I was going to skip it because I was like, man, I don't want to get the onions. And then you have the whole like Trial of the White Sage thing, which I tried doing. Because here's the thing for me with Pikmin 4 is a lot of it is... I don't really know where to call the difficulty, because in terms of the other games, it's like 2's the hardest for me, then 1, and then 3. Like 3 was really easy, but only like the second time I played through it. The first time I played through 3, I didn't know what I was doing, so it was my first Pikmin game, so it was definitely harder. It would probably be like that for the other 2 games if I try to replay them as well. But 4, I don't really know where to put it, because most of it's super easy. Like the caves, it's really weird. The caves and the bosses in the caves were actually the easiest parts of the game for me. That is normally not something I would say. That's actually the reverse for me in the second game. That was something I was a little bit disappointed about. Maybe it's because the game gives you so much help, because like you have Ochi, you have the ice Pikmin are so ridiculously broken where you can not... It's not only just like freezing the water, which is super helpful, because if there's any enemies in there, they're frozen now, you can destroy them and whatever. And it makes water not even really like an obstacle after a while, where I just kind of stopped using water Pikmin. But the ability to freeze any enemy, I mean, you get a similar thing with Ochi of eventually, like with the upgrades, you can just rush into things and it'll stun them, and that was really helpful towards the end. But the ice Pikmin, if you just have a bunch of them and being able to stun literally any enemy and it's frozen, and you can even run through it with Ochi and just have it get obliterated, that is crazy, but also super helpful. I feel like I might have used it a bit too much. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. It was fun. It was really satisfying. And also sometimes it was really helpful with like harder enemies, or sometimes I just didn't want to fight everybody. Sometimes I want to just freeze someone and like walk past them or whatever. But those definitely break the game. Ochi's whole... I think Ochi is something I have mixed feelings on in this game as a whole. Like, I almost wish he wasn't there. Like, he's a cutie pie, and he's definitely very helpful. I feel like part of the reason the bosses, like the ones in the cave and stuff, because I actually do like that there's bosses in the overworld, kind of like Pikmin 1, but then also the ones in the cave are like the main bosses, kind of like Pikmin 2. Ochi, it was really helpful being able to have all the Pikmin get on Ochi. It saved so many Pikmin from drowning. It made the bosses easier, where I can keep having the ability to just keep all your Pikmin in like a little circle basically and have them go where you're going and stuff is amazing, actually. But yeah, I feel like it made the bosses easier, especially stuff like the man at legs, where you're like running around and it's shooting the laser at you, and I didn't have to worry this time about the Pikmin that are trailing behind and are getting shot by the laser because they're all on Ochi. So that made things nice. I think for me, my problem with Ochi is the amount of upgrades that he has, because I was trying to treat it, and I mean, the game doesn't... It sort of forces the the upgrades are new in the sense of like you get to pick when you can upgrade and stuff, which is good. I purposely put off as many of them as possible, or I would upgrade Ochi to like a medium amount where he wouldn't have like the strength of a purple Pikmin or the rush being able to obliterate an enemy like on sight and everything, just because I felt like that was a good balance where I wanted him to basically be, I mean, I eventually did use him as like a second captain. You kind of end up having to do that towards the end, especially to multitask better, of having Ochi take some of the Pikmin and being able to like switch to playing as him was pretty nice. But I wanted to treat Ochi more of like a support Pikmin, like basically as like another purple Pikmin or something. Like I put off his attacking the most because I feel like a lot of the strategy in Pikmin, at least for me, is when you're actually trying to fight enemies and trying to aim at them and calling them back, and that's kind of more of the fun of the game for me anyways. I actually really liked fighting the enemies, so I tried not to use Ochi for that. I think I mostly just put him into like the ability to transport stuff. That was pretty nice at the end when he was able to just swallow them. And I think what got me to mostly upgrade Ochi though was the other modes, and those were the ones that were definitely a bit harder, the Dandori challenges and stuff, the battles, and the glow Pikmin, which I'm going to talk about a bit. I actually really liked the challenges at first. I thought they were pretty fun, where it was like the 7 minutes with a limited amount of Pikmin to like go do stuff or whatever. But then towards the end of the game, they were getting like a bit trickier. Like there was a couple, like one in Hero's Hideaway and one in Giant's Hearth that I just ended up not 100%ing and then coming back to later, because I would just try for like an hour straight, especially the one of the ones in Hero's Hideaway, and I just could not do it for the life of me. And then it was just more like annoying. Like I knew I didn't have to do those to beat the game. Like you don't actually have to rescue all the leaflings, I'm assuming, but you know, it just ends up getting kind of annoying because you're under like the time limit. It's not really just the time limit, it's also like you have to go around collecting the Pikmin, and sometimes there was like fences and things, and then and sometimes I would get one of the like the big fruits, the big collectibles, but then I'd like just run out of time, so they were kind of more irritating after a while than anything, especially the ones in the white sage thing. Like I got through the first two, I got to the third one, which is all about like digging up fruit, and I thought like, oh yeah, Ochi's really fast at digging, there's yellow Pikmin, I'll be fine, but I just never could beat the time. And that was the things that ended up being harder for me with the game, was just doing those specific challenges like over and over and over again. And that's kind of the main reason I upgraded Ochi, at least in terms of the like transporting stuff, because that ended up being super helpful. The battles that you have with Olimar and Louie, I actually really liked those. I kind of didn't at first. It was kind of just really chaotic, but they ended up being like actually pretty easy and like really fun towards the end. I actually wish there was more of those, or even if some of the leafling and stuff, instead of doing the challenges, because I felt like there was more challenges than battles, I kind of wish some of those were replaced with like the battles instead, because those were really fun. I liked that with the later ones you get that like question mark item that's kind of like Mario Kart effects, as I'll call it, of causing wacky things to happen, or you could use the stealth bomb and then literally blow up some of the enemy's points or whatever, and then having to collect the like higher ranked treasures and stuff. But those were really fun. I think that's also the reason I ended up upgrading Ochi's transport thing, because when you're like going against Moss with those, I noticed at a certain point in the game Moss already had the strength of like 100 Pikmin, and I still had Ochi at like 30, and I was like, okay, I need to make this like a bit easier or like more balanced, and I guess I should just upgrade the transport thing or whatever. But those were fun. I wish there was more of those. And then the nighttime expeditions, you know, before I actually played the game, I thought they were, because I think they were just straight up called like nighttime expeditions or something, I just assumed it was the same as daytime, but you get to walk around at night. I thought it would be like a harder version of like the overworld in the daytime and stuff, and I thought that sounds really cool, you'll be able to explore. So I was a little disappointed when I found out what it actually was, but I do think it's a cool mode. where it's basically just like a tower defense and using the glow Pikmin. Like, I ended up with like 160 seeds or something in the main story and everything by the time I did as many of the glow Pikmin like expeditions as I could, and then I only used them in like one cave to fight one specific boss that was just driving me nuts, and it was like the hardest boss in the game for me, actually. I'll get back to the bosses in the caves later. But yeah, I didn't really use the glow seeds. I just felt like I didn't want to in the caves. But it is pretty cool that the glow Pikmin, you know, I tried to keep the nighttime specific only. Their ability in that mode or whatever to automatically transport to wherever you are if they're like far away or something, that's super helpful. And the fact that they don't get affected by like fire, water, or anything is like very helpful in that mode. And I especially found it helpful, and I was doing it more where you could switch to Ochi, because I usually had Ochi defending the towers and stuff, but then eventually I would have to switch to him to like do some stuff. And the glow Pikmin would literally swap over to whoever you were playing as. So if you swap over fast and you're like trying to take out more enemies and stuff, that ended up really being the key to doing the nighttime modes. But those modes were cool. It was kind of fun defending the towers. Sometimes it would get a little annoying when it was getting harder, or just some of the stuff happening where even the littler enemies, if you're not paying attention to your like tower or whatever, could end up destroying it, and you could be on like the other side of the map. There was a lot of times where I had to like run all the way back because I was like, oh shit, I need to go defend the tower or something. It's kind of funny, the smoggy whatever, the big green one that shoots out smog or something that hatches out of the egg, I had assumed that was the final boss, actually, because it had these like beady red eyes, and the fact that it was only in that mode and I never found it in like the main story or anything. I think it was in a cave somewhere, maybe, I don't remember. And it matched the silhouette for the final boss before I remembered, oh right, the boss is supposed to be a giant dog. But I did think it was cool that that enemy was like kind of treated as like the final boss in a sense of your nighttime expeditions, and that's what I ended up having to do towards the end of like, I'd immediately run over to wherever the eggs are and take out the eggs immediately, and that saved so much time, and then I'd have to run back to the towers. I didn't technically finish the nighttime expeditions, like with the very, very last one, the primordial thicket. I tried for like an hour and I couldn't do it, and I ended up using the help option. I still got the glow sap and everything, but I don't know if eventually I'll go back and do it. I mean, I'm gonna give the game back in a while. I think I'm Pikmin'd out with that game. But that mode was really cool. I liked the ability to like go see what the maps look like at night, especially because it's like the same overworld maps as like when you're going through the main story and everything, to the point where like during the daytime, if you like build a bridge or something, or a rope or whatever, you end up getting to use those at night, and it ends up being super helpful trying to navigate. But I liked the glow Pikmin. I was kind of curious about them before I played the game, because I wasn't originally going to play this or buy this. Like, I remember seeing it come out, and at that point I'd only played the third game, and I thought, oh cool, there's a Pikmin 4. Like, I know there's people that were like waiting forever for this game because like the third one came out with the Wii U, so there's probably like a 10-year gap or something, but for me it's like I'd only played one Pikmin game, and it was 3, and I was satisfied with 3, to be honest. Like, the only reason I ended up getting to play more Pikmin games is because I kept stumbling on them, like different opportunities. Like with the first 2 games, I bought the Pikmin 1 and 2 thing at like a Black Friday thing at a GameStop for like $20 or something, and that got me to play the first 2 games, and then I got like really into Pikmin, and then with the 4th one my friend had it and I was like, hey, can I borrow it? But I'm really glad I got to play this. It was way more content than I expected. I want to talk about the comparisons with the second game. I feel like I need to talk about the second game, because this game is kind of like an easier version of like Pikmin 2 overall. It has like, I think, the most callbacks than like the other games, honestly, because Pikmin 2, I have a love-hate relationship with Pikmin 2, and I'll make some comparisons while I'm talking about it. I think it's kind of the most fun and like the most engaging, but it is like one of the most stressful games I've ever played, because like the whole Dandori thing, the strategy of like multitasking and what you're doing with your time and stuff, like the concept you're already doing in the other Pikmin games, they like really try to hammer it into you in this one, in 4. You know, that's already kind of stressful anyway, and then with 2, the overworld could sometimes be like a little tricky. There are so many enemies in 2 that I personally want to like stomp to death, honestly. My least favorite enemy in 2, over in the overworld at least, is there's this fish with legs that it was also in the caves too, that would throw a bomb and it would wipe out like most of your Pikmin. I hated that thing. I still I can picture exactly where it is in like the final world and everything. But I like the maps for those. I think the one that has the dream den, the final dungeon, the one that's like autumn themed, was really cool. It reminded me a little bit of Primordial Thicket in 4. But yeah, the overworlds, I think, if I had to guess, probably had like 10% of the treasures. There really wasn't that many in comparison to the caves, but it was still pretty cool to navigate. I always like doing the overworlds in Pikmin, but the caves are really the meat of the game, to the point where it's pretty much just, I refer to it in my head as like, oh yeah, it's the one with the caves. You spend like 90% of your time in caves. Some of the caves are really fun, probably a little bit of the more easier ones, but oh my gosh, the later caves can be a freaking nightmare, you guys. I mean, I don't know if everyone watching this has like played Pikmin 2, but oh boy. I think in terms of comparing them to 4, what made the ones in 4 a lot easier was, I think, 2 things. One is that most of the caves in 4 were really short. I think none of them went up to like 10 floors except for like the final dungeon was like 20 or something. And then meanwhile with 2, you were constantly having floors that would go up to like 15 or something. And sometimes I would try to do them all in one sitting. Sometimes it would be multiple days. And that definitely took a while. And then the thing with 4, oh my gosh, the ability to be able to leave and come back to any floor you want is like a godsend, honestly. If I had that in 2, I would have saved so many Pikmin's lives, because the whole thing of like, you go in a cave and let's say you're trying to either get through as many floors as you can just to get to the exit, because a lot of the time it was like that for me. I would just run to the exit as fast as I could, grab whatever treasure I could, maybe try to like beat the final boss or whatever. That's what it ended up being once I would go back to try to get the final boss, because like if you die in there, it doesn't like save or anything and you have to restart. I mean, even if you leave, you have to restart too, which is really annoying. I don't remember if you leave, if you even get to take the treasure with you or not. But yeah, that sucked in 2, because sometimes I would go there and I would try to get as much treasure as I could on the floor, but then sometimes I would have to come back because like, oh, I missed a treasure, or I don't have enough Pikmin. It's like, whoops, you have to go through everything again. And it was such a pain. And I wish I had something like the 4 survey drone in 2, because that is kind of how I played the caves in 2 a little bit, of having to run with Olimar and like 1 Pikmin or something. I remember so many times I'd have Louie like hold on to the rest of the squad, and I would go and I would kind of scout ahead in the map and see what things were like having that in 4 is nice. I didn't really use it much in terms of the caves, because the caves were a lot smaller and, you know, you can leave whenever. It would be fun. I wouldn't really have to leave that much. I mostly use the drones to find the decor Pikmin, actually, which I find really funny. But having something like that would have been cool in 2. Bringing back a lot of the bosses from 1 and 2, I thought were pretty cool, and it also made me realize how much easier 4 is compared to the other games. Like, I still remember the final boss with Pikmin 1 of that giant like Emperor Bullbox, or I think it's like the harder version of it or something, where it's like freaking massive for some reason. And the way you were supposed to beat it was having the yellows drop bombs. I think you could only mainly hurt it or stun it if you had bombs. And then if you tried fighting it in 4, because it was like throughout the game and stuff, you didn't even need the bombs for 1, and 2, it was so much easier to fight. It didn't have, I remember the one in 1 having a move where it would just start stomping around, like jumping around all throughout like the map, and it was so massive that you had to like run and everything. I think it sort of has something like that in 4, but it's like not a smaller effect. It made me realize, oh, this enemy is actually kind of easy-ish. But it was always kind of scary when I'd run into it at first, where I was like, oh, it's this guy. Or like 2, you know, they brought back the man at legs, which is also easier because now you can just have all the Pikmin on Ochi and avoid the laser. And it's, I swear I remember having like more attacks in 2. I feel like maybe some of the enemies got their movesets changed in 4. I'm not really completely sure. So like having stuff like that, or they would even recreate in the caves like specific rooms or areas or something, or specific fights from like the first 2 games. Like I still remember in 4 I got to that one room where it's just the 3 birds, and I very clearly remember that one area in the first game, and how it took me an entire in-game day just to like beat them all to get the treasure or whatever. I still hate those birds. It's probably my least favorite Pikmin enemy in terms of like overall, not because of the amount of Pikmin it can kill. It's just like really annoying for me to fight. And then it's kind of funny because I realized at that point of like, oh, I could use the flying Pikmin. It's weird with like the amount of new Pikmin you get, or the ability to take the Pikmin pretty much anywhere in 4, kind of gets rid of a lot of the danger of specific enemies from other games that were normally like way harder because of your Pikmin limitations. Like with the birds, in terms of regular Pikmin, I think you could only use like, you know, like the yellows or something, so they could reach the highest. And then I tried with the flying Pikmin. Well, they can fly like straight to the head and you're good, you know? That just makes it so much easier. They don't have the ability to like fall on the floor or anything. I mean, they could still get eaten, of course, but it makes that pretty much easy. Or the what is it, like the water wrath or something, the one that pushes the big rollers. That shit's scary in 2, because it's like the first 5 floors of one of the dungeons. I don't remember if it's I think it's in Gold Castle, or yeah, the original submerged castle, where you can only go in there with your water Pikmin. So even if you hypothetically had purples for whatever, which I think you do at that point, you can't take them in. So you have to avoid that thing and run and everything. I did like with the 4th game actually that you can only unlock the purple. Like the first time you run into that enemy, you unlock the purples when you get to the boss fight for that, if I remember. So it's still that same effect from 2 of like you finally get the purples and you get to beat the shit out of this thing, and it's really satisfying. And because of that, it's still like a threat the first time you run into it in 4 of you know, you have to avoid it. And especially because they put you in an area with like narrow hallways and stuff where you're going to get bulldozed and everything, and I still had Pikmin die. So I like that because they still kept some of those limitations. Certain enemies still have that same effect, but then it's really funny when you in the final dungeon you have an area where they try to make it still tense of like, now there's 2 of them and everywhere is a thin pathway and you have all these pots in the way. And I was like, oh shit, and I left the dungeon and I was like, I wonder if the game would just let me bring in the purples. And I did, and the game didn't stop me or anything in some way. So I brought the purples and I destroyed them instantly. So there's stuff like that, which is kind of satisfying, but also just like, where you can sort of cheese certain enemies that should be a bit more annoying and stuff. But I think what also made 4 a bit easier for me as well is, you know, a lot of the enemies being from previous games. Like there's this big beetle that shoots out rocks or something, and you have to hit the soft part of its back. And it's funny, with both 2 and 4, I had forgotten that you're supposed to toss a Pikmin into it to like suck up and get stuck, and then you can hit in the back. And I've seen it in 2. I fought it and I completely forgot how, and then when I got to 4 I was like constantly stuck on it where I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do? And then it finally clicked for me only after one of the characters mentioned of like, it sucks up a lot of air. And then I remembered, but then by that point I'd accidentally gotten like my entire squad of yellows killed because I'd left the Pikmin there and I was playing as Ochi and I didn't remember, oh right, I'm on the table with the boss right now. So I feel like a lot of my Pikmin 4 deaths mostly came because I got distracted, or I would play as like one of the other captains, and that's something that could happen with the previous two games as well, as like you're playing as a different character and then it's like, whoops, you forgot what the other one's doing or whatever. But I like that you always have the ability to like swap really fast. Like 4, I think you can assign things to certain buttons, and I never did that. I would just press Y and then you can pick stuff. But I mean, that was fine because you can like it kind of like pauses the game in a sense as long as you hold that button. Or what other controller stuff? I think I remember from 3 when you do the charge thing, because I just had played Pikmin 3 Deluxe before playing 4. I remember you have to like hold X or something, or otherwise you don't get to do the charge thing. And with 4, you just kind of tap it, you're good. Like the arrow stays there and stuff. I felt like the controls overall were pretty easy. I never really like hurt my hands or anything. I think one of the things that was kind of annoying in terms of mechanics, like compared to other games, was like, I remember with I think 2 and 3 or something, you get the ability to pluck the Pikmin with your whistle pretty easy. I think in both of those it's like an item you have to find. And then with 4, because I had no idea, because remember I was trying to make things harder for myself on purpose, so I wasn't buying all of the gear and whatever, because I don't remember if you could, I think you can turn the gear off. I kept forgetting about that. But I was like saving my money. I didn't want to buy all those things. Only after you buy all the gear do you get the whistle that plucks the Pikmin when you whistle. And that was really annoying, where I wasn't able to do that most of the game. And I just assumed something like that you'd get from like a boss, or it would eventually pop up with the buying thing. So I almost wish I'd known that, but I didn't want to like Google anything about this game. So I guess in that sense I made things more, it doesn't even like, not having that whistle make things harder, it just makes things more time consuming and a little annoying. I think that's actually one of the things I didn't like from 4. Like I mentioned about OT making things really easy, same with the Ice Pikmin. The amount of things you can buy and the ability to buy, I actually didn't really like that, because I felt like it was like too much. Like the gear, on one hand, it is kind of cool to just be able to buy all the gear if you have enough like gems, you know, the money basically. That was pretty nice. And I do like that early on you can't just like buy a bunch of it, because you have to be using that same material, you know, to build all the bridges and do everything. So you kind of have to like balance it a little bit, and you kind of buy the gear over time. I'm assuming that's probably what you're supposed to do. But then by the end, once you have enough of those materials, and they respawn all the time, so they're like super easy to get, and you constantly get them from like the side missions and stuff, then you can just buy all the gear you want after a certain point. Like I think probably by the time you get to like the 3rd world or something, you probably could have like bought it all or whatever. But again, I was trying to like put that off as much as I could, especially because there's so many. I think the last 4 that I just kept leaving behind was the HP things, where because once you buy all those HP things, it is really hard for you to die, within the main story anyway. I think I ended up buying those because I was constantly dying in like the nighttime mode on the harder levels, and I really needed that HP. So that's why I ended up buying that. But I do kind of miss, because it was more satisfying for me, in 2 and 3, where you were constantly finding the gear. It would kind of be a reward for things like from certain bosses, or you would find it in a certain area, and that was nice because it like gave a sense of progression. And also I still remember, like with the second game, I always call that the one where I would beat up enemies with one Pikmin, or just as Olimar or something, because I would you get the punching thing. I think you get like 2 upgrades to it. For some reason, I've noticed it only with that game, because you have the triple punch thing in 4, but I noticed it actually barely does any damage, so that's why I wasn't using it much, which I was disappointed. For some reason in 2, you can do like a ton of damage to enemies when you have the fully upgraded punching glove. So sometimes I would just do that. I would have the Pikmin do a task, and then I'd go up and I'd beat up the enemies, so I'd have less Pikmin die, and that was actually really fun. And I still remember getting that as like a reward, and I was like, you could punch the enemies. Or 2, I remember had this thing, but I never used it, where you could basically like play dead. I don't remember if you gained HP from it or something, but I always forgot how to use it. But there was a lot of cool stuff like that, but just the the earning of it was really nice. And it gave that sense of progression. And then you don't have that in 2 because you can buy all that stuff whenever. And the fact that only money is your limitation makes it so you can like get that stuff really easy. And then you also have the items in 4 as well. Did I say 2 earlier? I meant 4, in terms of buying. I tried not to use the items. I felt like it would make things too easy. Like, I could understand for people, because I feel like 4, from playing it, I can say is probably designed more towards like beginners in a sense. Not everything. I feel like some stuff like the Dandori challenges is probably supposed to be for more of like challenging for or more for like the more experienced players and stuff, which I definitely felt as I was doing that. I think having previous Pikmin playthrough for like the other games definitely helped, but the items, it made things easier, so I just didn't buy them, and that was fine, because those are things you're not like required to buy them by the game or anything. I think I only bought some by the end, and it was literally just for the final dungeon as like hey, just in case I need them. And it's funny, in like hindsight and everything, talking about it, because the hardest boss for me in the game, because like I said, most of them were really easy, and I'm including the final boss in this, was the freaking Empress Bullbacks, but it's specifically the one in the Cavern for a King, where you're like locked in this little box square, and you're actually able to get like squished this time. You can't like just stand in front of it and keep shooting the Pikmin. That's still crazy to me, because like they barely changed anything with it, but it just becomes harder when you can't like hit it in the face as easily anymore, and you're like within the rolling path to be able to hit it. I had to restart that fight for like half an hour because I kept dying, and it was harder for me than like anything else. And if I had known, I would have used like all of my items, because I barely used any of them. I think I used like 2 bombs in that fight, like the regular bombs. I only used the lightning in terms of the items on the final boss, and that wasn't even anything out of like attacking it or to do more damage. I just wanted to make the fight go faster, because it's like 3 different rounds, and it stunned it enough where I was able to just get through the rounds faster. That's the only reason I used it. But other than that, I didn't use the items. But yeah, the Emperor Bullbacks is the one enemy I wish that I had. I'd say out of the items, I barely used them. I could see the ice bomb being really helpful. It's basically like having a bunch of ice Pikmin, where if you toss enough of them, it like freezes the enemy. And at one point in one of the fights I did, but I reset it, I just straight up froze the Empress Bullbacks, and now I wish I did that again. That was like the one time I used that item, because I was just tossing items at it to see what would happen. But I think the lightning's kind of helpful, because it like stuns things, and I used it once during a fight with 3 of the Emperor Bullbacks, and it actually stunned all of them. Like, I just assumed it was an item that would like work for one enemy. Like, I do think the items are cool. Like, I noticed there was like bombs that would like follow the enemies, and I could see that being really helpful. And I don't think I'd do another playthrough of this again, mostly because it's my friend's copy of the game, and I don't want to borrow it again to do another replay. I'm done with Pikmin 4. I'm satisfied. But I feel like if I did it again, I would get that whistle faster and just turn off a lot of the gear. I wouldn't be afraid to use items this time, even though I didn't really feel like I would need them, but it would have made a lot of things less frustrating in terms of like the time consuming stuff, like some of the Dandori challenges and stuff, because I think you can use the items in like pretty much any mode, honestly, unless you're Olimar, then you have to like earn your own items or whatever. The one item I actually was using quite a bit was the spray. Not really because I needed it, except for like certain fights where I just thought, okay, I just want to get this over with or whatever. But I always like using the spray. It's pretty helpful, and it's easy to get the berries, especially once you get the flying Pikmin, and they turn rivers and hazards kind of into a joke. And then with Ochi, in terms of the upgrades, and it's kind of annoying, I don't know if it's the way the game wants you to play it, where his final skill is the ability to rush everywhere, and I'd finally just upgraded Ochi to max after a certain point, because I wanted the swallow ability, but also, hold on a sec. I wanted the swallow ability, but also just I wanted to make the Trials of the White Sage just easier on myself. And I had read somewhere that like, oh yeah, you kind of have to have Ochi like maxed out. What's really annoying is to get that rush ability, you can literally only get it if you like beat Louis and you get that final stupid pup point or whatever. But the thing is, the way I always play Pikmin is I collect everything and then I go fight the final boss, so I'm like done or whatever. Because the thing is, after the final boss, and if you like boot up the game again, which I only did because I wanted to make the video on the treasures and checking out the entries for everything, so that the final boss would be in there, you're able to just continue playing. Like, it's even justified in the story of like, hey, we're supposed to stay for a little while, and then you have the option to like officially leave the planet, and then I don't actually know what happens after that because I didn't try it. I don't know if that leads to like a different ending or whatever. It looked like it was the same, so then I just kind of quit the game. But what was I gonna say? I mean, that infinite rush would be pretty nice if I decided not to do that, and if like, let's say I just wanted to beat the final boss or something and I wasn't doing like a 100% run, and then, you know, you can just run around getting the treasures. But even at the end of the game, when I was like grinding the berries and getting some of those last treasures, it's like I'd already killed everyone in the map and I was just using the flying Pikmin at that point. So it kind of already becomes really easy anyway. I think that's one of my other complaints with this game is the maps and stuff. I think it's actually kind of stupid that the enemies don't respawn. It's really weird how it works, where the ones in the caves, if you 100% the caves, the game says how the enemies decided to come back, so you get to fight them again, and you think, oh cool, you can like get more Pikmin this way because the ones in the overworld don't freaking respawn. But no, it just turns into the sparkly stuff. You don't actually get to make more Pikmin. You've already have enough sparkly stuff and you've unlocked all the areas. It's kind of just useless at that point. I do think that's kind of cool because I feel like that's where a lot of the challenges in the caves come from, is the enemies, because the puzzles are actually really easy, which I'm thankful for, honestly. I want to talk about that a little, because like the ones in 2 could definitely be kind of tricky sometimes. The one I ended up actually really liking, and the one where I remember I said when I was recording, I said, yeah, I'm not smart enough for this, and then I figured it out when I looked at the map again, is the ones where it was like the fans. I actually really like using the fans that like shoot you around. I thought they were pretty cool, especially during Heroes Hideaway, because you have to use them a lot. Anyway, the enemy thing, yeah, they don't respawn in the overworld, and that sucks. I mean, you do still have the pellets that you can find around the bases and stuff, and that's really helpful if you want more Pikmin, or the corpses actually stay behind in the enemies sometimes, and that's pretty nice because you can come back to an area like a week later or whatever, and then you can just pick up the corpses and stuff. But that's kind of annoying. And then also when you don't have like onions for Pikmin, you actually can't make more at all unless you find the candy pops. Like, that's how it turned out to be for the purples and whites. I literally couldn't make more anywhere except unless I found those candy pops, and I didn't find any more for the white Pikmin until the final dungeon. I was desperately trying not to use them. So I guess that's kind of the main motivator for trying to get those onions. That's the one thing I'm never going to go back for in that game. I never would. It's the Trial of the White Sage was too hard for me. But yeah, not only is it annoying not having enemies respawn in the main overworlds because you can't make more Pikmin or anything, and it kind of takes away a lot of the challenge, it also just looks weird because you finish an area, because keep in mind, the maps are really huge. I think especially because of the camera change, where normally Pikmin, it's like a top view of everything, and I actually do really like that top view because it makes everything feel so much smaller, especially like your character and stuff. But also I do like the new camera angle though, of the camera behind you, because I mean it also makes you feel small but in like a different way, and I feel like it's kind of a funner view in a sense, like you feel like you really are the player character. But the enemies being gone means it's just these like huge empty maps of just nothing. And I mean, it's really pretty to look at. I adore the visuals in this game, but if you're going back to an area just to do like a Dandori challenge, or let's say it's that big stupid purple eraser that requires 1,000 purple Pikmin or whatever, then it's just kind of a little boring running around the map. It's actually my same problem with the game Banjo-Tooie as well. I never really like that when it just ends up being when all the enemies and stuff is gone, where it's just like a big empty map you're kind of forced to go back to or something. It makes it feel a little soulless. But yeah, I didn't really like that with the maps. Like, not that I had to go back to planets often, but or not planets, but you know, like worlds or whatever. But I did have to do that like a couple of times, or for the decor Pikmin, so that kind of sucked. In terms of the individual worlds, I always like the ones that are outside. I thought the first two worlds were pretty good. The like the terrace is like a nice like beginner world. I like that it's pretty much just a backyard where it has like the bench and having these like little gardens and stuff. I thought that was pretty nice and gives a good variety of like using the first three types of Pikmin. You do have that challenge a bit, which kept throwing me off, of like having the whole, I didn't like it at first, but it kind of grew on me, having to collect the Farlicks to gain more Pikmin, because once you get like 50, then the game gets like way easier. But like those beginning sections where you don't really have a lot and you're trying to figure out what to do and you can't really freeze any of the water and stuff, that it's actually kind of a nice challenge at the beginning. And the way the game's kind of designed around that. And then the Blooming Arcadia is also really pretty, of having I like the section of it with the flower petals and stuff. What else? I think Serene Shores was my favorite, because there's like different kinds of water worlds and stuff. I think the one in the first game's a little annoying, where there's a section of it where it's just mostly water. That can be kind of tricky. I remember one of them has like I think Threes is like tropical themed or something, which is pretty cool. I haven't really talked much about 3. I don't think I will, just because I feel like that's the one that Pikmin 4 takes the least from, but I was kind of okay with that, honestly. 3 kind of feels like the odd game out of all of them now that I think about it, except for having, and I thought it was kind of a fun detail, the 3 Copite treasure hunters or whatever that you end up having to rescue as part of the story in 4 are like a callback to the captains from 3. They even mention about Nelly having a relative who's a botanist, who I'm assuming supposed to be Brittany, so I thought that was pretty fun. And then bringing back the flying and rock type Pikmin. The rock type Pikmin I feel like I wasn't using much in 4. I think mostly because the purples, I'll get back to talking about Serene Shores, I promise. The purple, it was so weird having like all the Pikmin types plus technically ice. I feel like glow, you don't get to use them in the overworld, so I feel like ice was kind of the only like new Pikmin, and I thought that was good because you already have so many. It's actually kind of interesting with the way you get to use the Pikmin, where it's like for the first 2 worlds, it's kind of just like the primary colored Pikmin, you know, the first 3, and then you end up getting ice. I actually like that ice is like the first one that you end up getting after that, or like one of the first ones you get. Oh yeah, I think water you end up taking a while to get. I think you get it by like world 3. But yeah, the ice Pikmin are the most broken, but they're also the funnest to use. The rock Pikmin I feel like I wasn't using much. Not only, you know, you have to use them to like break walls or other stuff. And I mean, it is nice, and I finally realized it with 4, and I just didn't realize it with 3, which is really funny to me, that they don't have the ability to get squished, and for a lot of later enemies it ends up being really helpful. But in terms of, you know, you toss them at enemies and that's that, I feel like the purple are kind of better to use because they're a bit more hefty and stuff. And then it's kind of funny because I thought the game really was over after the first 4 worlds, because like, okay, you rescued Olimar, and I thought, oh man, we're already getting Olimar. Like, I was expecting a fake out with Louie, kind of like with 3, where it was going to be Louie inside of the thing, but no, because this is basically Pikmin 2, so Louie has to be the final boss, pretty much. But yeah, and then I was like, man, I just got the flying Pikmin and the poisons. What am I supposed to do with them? But then once you have the next two worlds, you're using those Pikmin constantly. And then by the end of the game, I was only pretty much using ice, poison, and flying, because the flying, for especially for Primordial Thicket, makes it so much easier to navigate stuff. I mean, the treasures, and then the poisons are really fast, and you have like poison now, but also the Pikmin are quick to carry things, so that was actually nice. They're saved more as like a post-game type of Pikmin. I think I can call it post-game if it's like after the credits, basically. Anyway, Serene Shores, I really like that one. It's really chill, you know. I mean, I get that it's in the name, but I like that it feels the most like a ocean level of like you're at the beach, of having the beach sometimes be kind of wet. I really liked the structure that's basically just a giant sandcastle, and then it has that fight with the scorpion looking enemy at the top. I thought that was pretty cool, and you have to like climb up there, and there's all those, whatever those green enemies are that shoot the rocks out at you, which I thought it was interesting. I remember in 2, those rocks would sometimes actually go in a circle, and I used that to my advantage a lot of the time to be able to shoot it at, kind of lead the rock around. Or no, wait, I think it was 3 actually. I did that in, I think 2 and 3. And I would use it to hit the other enemies, and then the ones in 4 would mostly only shoot in a straight line, so I couldn't do that anymore. That was something I also personally missed, and it's just probably like a me thing of like using one Pikmin to attack a lot of enemies, and using enemies to kill other enemies is really satisfying. But I noticed I couldn't really do that a lot in 4, except actually in the final dungeon. I was finally able to do that a bit more. But yeah, Serene Shores is cool. It's like it's a water area, but it's only like half of the map that's like in water. I especially noticed that when I was doing the Olimar's Tale thing, where it was like 4 treasures were in one side of the map in the water, and the other 4 were like on land. I even like that it has a little like sort of foresty looking section of it that's really small, but it only has like a little bit of water. But that was one of my favorite maps. That was actually really cool. I didn't mind even going back there for some of the treasure and stuff. What else? And then it's Giant's Hearth. Or wait, no, I skipped over Hero's Hideaway. Yeah, Hero's Hideaway, I felt a little disappointed. I feel kind of mixed on it, actually, because, you know, that's the first area you go in the game, which I do like how that ties into, like, you play as Olimar, it's like a little prologue, and then you get to do that again and kind of lead up to that point once you do the Olimar's Tale thing. And then when you actually get to go to Hero's Hideaway, it's cool because it's like, whoa, you know, it's the first time you're inside of a house. That's really cool. That's like a big deal, to the point. And I actually love that detail where Olimar and the Pikmin, and even I think your Pikmin, they land there and they immediately start running around because they've never seen the inside of a house before. I thought that was really cute. Like, the characters always seem to wonder about the Pikmin, but the Pikmin really just are little playful guys. They just want to vibe. Like, I like in every game, like I remember in 3 especially, or just because that's kind of on the top of my head right now, where when you find the Pikmin, they're all kind of just, before you actually meet any of them, they're all just kind of like staring at you from above and wondering who this new captain is and whatever. But yeah, Pikmin are they're just silly little guys, and you're forced to use them to kill your enemies and carry treasure and stuff. But yeah, Hero's Hideaway, I do like, and it makes everything feel a lot bigger as well. I think because, you know, it's the inside of a house, it's a modern house, it's, you know, things we have in our daily lives that we know the size of as humans and stuff, so I think because it's so familiar, it makes it feel like they're even larger, of like you're next to a giant pillow and whatever. So I liked that aspect of it, but I felt like it was actually kind of a boring map. I actually do like the concept, like the first time you go there, before you rescue Olimar, where Moss is running around on the floor, and you can't really stay on the floor too long because then Moss finds you and kidnaps your Pikmin. It wasn't like too big of a deal. It's very easy to take Moss out, actually, which makes it funnier when you constantly run into Olimar and Moss throughout the game, and there's always like a little cutscene and I'm like, oh my gosh, just go. Moss doesn't have much HP, just go take the captive back or whatever. That's kind of funny, but But yeah, I do like that they added that challenge, and I feel like it kind of needed it because it's actually kind of easy. I think because there's so much floor space mostly, and there isn't really any obstacles on the floor, it's just the enemies there. It makes that part pretty easy. I think more of it is just the navigation of like having to slide down on wires or the bags and having to use the fans. I think that's the only level with the fan, if I remember right. But that's pretty cool, and that's nice when you get to like the upper areas and you get the introduction of those worlds. Wait, no. I think it's in one of the other areas too, actually. Where it's the ones that look like you're inside of a house, like you're in a little toy area. Which I love that concept, honestly. Like, they expanded on it in this game. Because in 2, I remember, because a lot of 2, like when you're inside of a cave and you look out to the sides, it's just like a black void in there. It's kind of scary. It makes the caves feel more isolating. And there was some areas where it was like toy tracks and of like a train or whatever. And then with 4, they have even more of that, where the floor is like a play mat and there's wooden blocks everywhere. And then you look out and you're like inside of a house. There's always really warm lighting. It feels like you're inside of an actual floor in a house of like a kid's little play area. So I love that personally, in comparison to 2, where it's still very like dark and spooky out there. They do have some dark and spooky things, of course. Like I thought the backgrounds were interesting, where in the kind of more factory looking levels you can see like machinery and equipment and stuff. Like there was always something in the background rather than just endless void inside the caves, and I thought that was really cool. It made me wonder where we are. Like, one of my favorites, it starts popping up in Primordial Thicket, is what looks like you're inside of, I thought it was like an aquarium at first. Could be like a exhibit for like a lizard or something, and that's why everything's so muddy. I thought that was really fun. So just stuff like that, we're kind of just warping inside of different locations rather than like, okay, you're going underground or whatever. It ends up being a little nonsensical. But I think it's really fun. What was the other thing? And what's also crazy to me with this game is, like, I just assumed in the other games, because I'm assuming PNF 404 or whatever has to be, you know, Earth. Like, the characters constantly talk about, like, oh, it's the dangerous, toxic oxygen and whatever, and just the whole idea of finding all these treasures that are very obviously from humans. I just assumed this was one of those things where, like, humanity's dead, and that's why you don't see any humans. At least that was my thoughts in the previous games. And, you know, now it's just the Pikmin and all of these creatures that spawned in that are running around in, like, the world's remains, especially because all the environments were, like, natural outdoor things and stuff. And especially because I remember with the treasures in 2, some of the metal you would find would be rusted, or just the fact that a lot of this stuff was like buried so heavily underground, and it was like normal things, sometimes even like fruit or whatever. I mean, not in 2, I mean 3 was the one that was all about fruit. But then you get to 4, and then bam, literally first time you boot up the game, you're Olimar, you crash inside of a house, and you know, it's obviously a house that's lived in, it's clean, you can see the sun outside, there's like things cooking on the stove. I do appreciate with 4, because I was kind of worried about it when I was playing the game, of like, are you going to see a human? Not literally an entire human, but maybe like a foot or something. I like half expected that in like Hero's Hideaway or whatever, but the fact that it's like a home that's very like lived in and everything, you know, and there's like a modern TV there and stuff, and you're finding like the Switch as a game console or whatever. Humanity is very much alive in how a lot of the places you're going to now, like 2 of them are literally just like backyards. Like in Giant's Hearth, you literally have like the grill that has the kebab on it, which it kind of took me a while to realize that was a grill. I thought it was some kind of like fortress or something until I got on top and I realized, oh, you're supposed to cook things here. But yeah, I do think that's kind of interesting, of sort of the reveal in the sense in that game, because I feel like it was kind of up to debate with the previous ones of like, okay, you're finding humanity's things, But here it's like, yeah, no, humanity's still alive. You go inside of a house, you don't ever see them or whatever. But I do think it is kind of cool because it's like there's still people around it really does feel like an alien world, even though I'm pretty sure it's like Earth basically. But because you're tiny and you're like playing as an alien and stuff, I think that definitely adds to it. And that's like one of my favorite things about Pikmin, like vibe wise and everything. What else? I actually like that there's a ton of characters in this game, because I mentioned with the first game, it's just you as Olimar, and then in the second game it's just you, Louis, and the president. And then with the third game, I mean, that was my first one, so I was already used to the idea of like having 3 captains and stuff, which ends up being a bit much. I'm glad they got rid of that with 4. But I do kind of like all the characters you have in the different games. Like with the first one, it's just Olimar, and then the second one you're introduced to the concept of like having a second captain, and now things are easier, but you get to do it with like puzzles and stuff. Though it's interesting because like that's like the one game where your captains don't really like talk to each other or anything. Like Louis and Olimar kind of just don't. You're sort of just there, and then you end up losing Louis, and you have that whole thing in the credits where he's like wandering around and has to survive. And I definitely need to talk about Louis and Olimar in this game for sure, because oh boy. And then you're the president. I do actually like in 2 that you get to play as the president in the rest of the game, even after you've like already rescued Louis and everything. But even then, you only get those cutscenes where the characters are talking to each other. You don't have any cutscenes where you're together saying anything like throughout the game. They might as well, like, none of those people will be like a team or anything. I think before I played this game, I thought the crew in 3 was my favorite of Alf, Brittany, Charlie. Like, they all have their own very distinct personalities, and they're a team. They talk to each other and stuff. They seem to all get along. You have to like slowly rescue the other 2 throughout the game and stuff, and then they end up getting Louis. That's like one of my favorite things in the series actually, and it pissed me off the first time I played because it's unexpected, where you rescue Louis and they think he's Olimar, and then he steals all your juice, and suddenly it's like, oh, you can actually die now, and if you're not careful in collecting the juice. It was crazy for me though, and I kept forgetting about it when I replayed 3 recently, which 3 I don't really have much to say on because it's like kind of the easiest, and I literally got through it in a week. It's so short. But I had like 50 juice because I collected all the fruit constantly, and then suddenly you're back to 0, and it's like, oh, and it's just kind of like this random moment, because then you capture Louis and then he's tied up in your ship. I actually did really miss the ship. I was hoping that was something that would come back in 4, because I liked with 3 your little like menu of going to the planets and stuff and having most of your cutscenes too would take place inside of that ship, even though it was really small. And then you could even see things like the rubber ducky and Louis floating around the background. And then when I saw the ship in this game, I thought, man, the SS Shepherd looks really cool. And I mean, you do technically get scenes in there, and I do really like those, and I'll talk about it more of like the characters talking, but you don't actually get to see the inside. I get it because like your hub is like the little world outside where you talk to everybody, but it would have been nice. It's kind of a nice vibe. If anything, it makes it feel weird where it's like you don't have to like suddenly get off the planet anymore. It's just like, okay, go back to base, that's it. It feels a little, I don't know, because I actually liked in the other games where it's like you finally get in your little spaceship, you go off to space for the night, and then you drop back down in the morning, because it does really feel like you're escaping and everything. You have that sense of danger, especially after like a hard in-game day. And then the 4th game is just like, okay, you have a safe place to go on the ground. You just spend the night in your ship on the ground and everything. So it's like a little bit of a bummer. The other thing I was going to say is, you know how you see Olimar's ship throughout the game, and then you end up getting to rebuild it in this one again. I actually really miss, because I'm assuming it's the same ship, I don't know, like, and it's still funny to me, with the first game you run around collecting all those ship parts, you risk your life for it, and then immediately at the start of the second game, which is like the one time I think you get to see another planet besides PNF 404, you actually get to see Hokotate a little bit, which is something with 4 that bugged me. They talk constantly about like other planets and where people are from, and you don't get to see the rest of the galaxy. Like, I want to see what the other planets look like and how things are sized. I think that would be really cool. But anyway, your ship gets destroyed or like sold off or whatever, and then you get the new ship and it has the ability to talk, and I actually really liked that, especially when I went through the treasures in the second game, and the entries aren't just by Olimar and Louis, they're also by like the ship AI, and I was kind of thinking something like that was going to happen with 4, because before you end up rescuing the guy that like labels all your treasures and stuff, they mentioned something about like, oh, the ship AI is the one that's like naming all of these, and I thought, okay, is the SS Shepherd able to speak? Or even just like you constantly find Olimar's ship in the other games, or not constantly, but it's like a consistent thing, and it never says a word after the second game. It kind of felt like it was a third character, like it's you, Olimar, and your ship, or no, it's Olimar, Louis, and the ship in 2. So I kind of wish that had come back in the other ones, or at least in 4. That would have been kind of cool. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I was talking about the characters in 4. I actually like that you have the ability to create your own character. I think that's pretty cool, and using that as like the whole thing of joining the rescue corps and everything, because you have Olimar and Louis. They go from being like the main characters in the first 2 and their stuff with the president to being more of like important but still kind of side characters in the other games. I did like with 3, you have like whole new characters that are like a squad. They're trying to just save their planet. I think that's pretty noble. And then the 4th game, you're this person who joins the corps, because then you're able to expand on so much of like getting to bond with your teammates and having Ochi. It's just you and Ochi. It's still crazy to me. It's like your first ever mission and you have to just do everything. Like, there's so many other Rescue Corps members, and like, I mean, they are helping you. You constantly have like Colin and Shepard on like your comms and stuff, and some of their tips were actually really helpful about enemies and other things, and probably did save me from a few Pikmin deaths. Yeah, it's just you going around like rescuing everybody. But anyway, the customization's fun. I do like, based on whatever like body types you pick, you get like different faces. I kind of wish it was like Animal Crossing, where you could pick like any face you want. I know that'd probably be a lot more to like figure out or whatever, but I was kind of expecting something like that, or unlocking more later. That's the thing with the what is it? The update, which, that definitely influenced my Pikmin 4 playthrough, because, and it was crazy timing too. It was just happened to be a coincidence where, I'd never played this game. I remember seeing the update came out. I think I watched it and then forgot about it because I didn't have the game. And then my friend was going to lend me all of these, and the update was already out. And now I can't imagine playing this game without the update. So that's my perspective with this. Because first off, you have the ability to, once you rescue like 10 leaflings or something, which actually does take a while because you need to unlock like puddles first, and then you get to turn into a leafling, and that was the sole reason I was trying to rescue and find so many leaflings. So I was doing all the Dandori challenges, and I know that influenced my playthrough. And it is kind of nice because it turns your hair into like looking like a leafling, and I actually really like that concept because the character customizations are cute, and I like that basically every, I can't call them humanoid character, whatever, that you meet is some form of that character customization thing. I mean, the ones in the corpse have their own little accessories and whatever, and specific hairstyles I don't think you could get otherwise. Actually, I'm not completely sure. Like Shepard having the bandana, or Yanni having like the little doctor's head thing. But everyone is some kind of version of that character customization thing where you can like look like anyone. And I think that's pretty cool, honestly. But I thought the faces were like pretty cute. The Pikmin, like, standard of everything. If you can be any sort of like body type, I guess. I don't really know what to call it. Like the little ones, like Alf and Olimar, up to like Charlie, and then But yeah, with the leafling thing, it's kind of cool because you're locked into one specific thing. Like you're a leafling and stuff. You can't like change your hairstyle or anything. You can just change the color in the face. But I like that with those options. I mean, you do see them with the leaflings that you rescue and stuff. You can make your character kind of look more alien. You know, you can choose not to have a nose and a mouth. I liked the one specifically with the 6 pairs of eyes, kind of like a spider, which makes it really funny because I ran around most of the game like that. We were talking to these cute little humanoid characters, and then I would turn the camera around, and then our character is just on this giant dog. And I mean, it doesn't help that like Ochi's adorable. Ochi doesn't look very alien-like, except not having a nose for some reason. You know, I won't question how sniff works, but yeah, you can look kind of more alien, and I thought that was pretty fun. So that kind of influenced how I played because I was trying to get the leafling thing, but I thought the customization was cool, and that also meant like, you know, you name yourself, but it doesn't really like mean anything, you know. What else? And the whole thing of like becoming a better rescue corps person. I kind of wish the characters acknowledged that throughout the game. Actually, I kind of assumed they would after maybe like a certain amount of bosses where they're like, you're really stepping up or whatever. It's only at the end though, once you actually rescue everyone, that it's like, oh wow, you're an official member. And it's like, bro, I just rescued everyone. I fought a giant dog and did all this stuff, because they only, I think, acknowledge it like after you rescue Louis, because he's like technically your final person. But like, what about all the other stuff I did, you know, of doing a planetary exploration pretty much by yourself? But it is nice that like when you rescue the characters, besides introducing themselves, they all like thank you, like they do verbally say thank you. That's pretty nice, rather than just be, and a lot of them do turn into like a side quest thing, and I thought that was pretty fun. In terms of like, you know, it made me seek out more things. I mean, you do get the same reward every time, and once you run out of things to build and buy, it kind of just ends up being useless. Like literally at the end of the game, when I booted it up again after beating the final boss, I finally got the gems for going everywhere and beating everyone and getting all the treasures, and you literally can't get the last treasure in boss entry until after you beat the giant dog. And then it's like, okay, what am I supposed to do with these gems? It makes me feel like you're supposed to not collect everything at once or whatever, but I don't know, maybe it's if you want to buy more items. I guess you constantly have to have a way to earn money, unless you end up being like locked out of the items and whatever. But I thought the like NPC characters were cool in that they're all from different walks of life. I liked the painter that forgot their paint supplies. I remember there was these 2 characters that had like a rivalry with each other. There's like a whole television station of people that you have to rescue. There's like a YouTube content creator or something. I thought the high school students were kind of interesting. Like, as I was rescuing people, I was sort of turning it into like a mental game of judging these people on how much I sympathize with them being like trapped on the planet and the reason they came, and seeing if it was like, okay, you probably should be here, like it makes sense for you to come here. Or some of them where I'm like, what the hell are you doing going to like an unexplored planet? Like some of them are there for adventure, and it is kind of funny because like when you start rescuing people, the rescue corps characters are just constantly referring to them as like tourists who are probably coming here on vacation or treasure hunters, and then it turns out most of them actually have like a good reason for being there. It's kind of funny. Like I think the Copite scientists were trying to get money to like rescue their planet or something, which made me sad because like you work so hard in 3 of like getting all the fruit, and then you find out they're going to probably starve again, and it's just like, bro. And then it turns out to be because part of the reason is because they're fussy eaters and they only eat like juice, which they end up getting from like the glow sap or the fruit. So does that mean they could have, like, if they weren't that way, could they have gotten like any food and probably been fine? I don't know. Though it is interesting to think about actually, because like Olimar mentions in his entries about, man, if I could take some of this food home, no one on my planet would starve. you could end world hunger, but I don't know anything about agriculture and the seeds and being able to take it back. And it's kind of funny because like Brittany was the botanist of 3, and then being able to take back the fruit and save the planet is like the whole point. But I mean, I think at that point you're like literally collecting the fruit as well, probably not just using like the seeds and whatever. But yeah, Almar has the chance to end world hunger. Just hire a botanist, dude. What was I going to say? But yeah, there's like the treasure hunters that are doing stuff like that, or the high school students. At first I thought like, why are they bringing students here? But they're like part of the planetary exploration club. They're like trying to learn about planets, because that's the thing I think I forgot about in Pikmin until I was like playing more of this game of like, oh right, the characters from all these different planets are able to go wherever. I forget that like space travel is the norm for them, because it's not that way for us. It's interesting to think about, because in Pikmin 4 they mention about like when you're looking at the treasure stuff of some of these inventions being so advanced, and the characters speculating what the treasures could be used for by humans or higher beings or whatever, and a lot of it seeing more advanced than like stuff they have on their own planets. But then these people have space travel, like where you can go to another planet and take a vacation. Almar's whole job is basically being kind of like a space truck driver in a sense, or the people in 3 being scientists. So it makes sense for them all kind of being there and stuff, except Almar's case is I'm not ready to talk about Almar actually yet, about like constantly being sent back by the president. But yeah, a lot of the people, it makes sense. I remember there was like an archaeologist, there's the treasure people, there's someone who just studies like geology or whatever. I mean, they're not all scientists, but I feel like for a lot of them it actually made sense for them to be there, based on their careers and stuff, or like the high school students studying about planets. So I actually thought that was kind of nice. I was half expecting when I found out like, oh, you have to rescue people, I thought, oh, is it all just like idiot treasure hunters or whatever? Because I feel like that definitely would happen, because I think Olimar has like some treasure in the picture when he like sends out the SOS or whatever. But anyway, yeah, I liked a lot of the NPC characters. They don't have big roles or anything except for like the plot important ones, where they have the side missions, but they also kind of have fun dialogue. I mean, they actually all have more dialogue than I expected, but that's pretty nice. And then the Rescue Corps is also cool. I was kind of worried at first that like you wouldn't really get to interact with them much, or they wouldn't, because there's like 6 of them, which is the most we've gotten so far. But it's actually pretty nice, like your first 2 being like Shepard and Colin. Colin, I think, was my favorite out of everyone. I don't know why. I think probably because he's the one that you get to interact with the most, being like your communication person and stuff. It's only really like him and Shepard, at least for like the main story stuff, they're on your communication. And then when you're doing the nighttime expeditions, it's Yanni. But the conversations with Colin are kind of funny, like the nighttime ones, which is actually one of my favorite things of the game. I want to talk about that a bit too, where you learn more about the characters' personalities, because they get to talk to each other about various things, and you kind of do get to learn a lot of stuff from that, of like the nighttime talks of the ships, where you learn about how like Yanni's the doctor that's doing these experimentations on the other Rescue Corps members and the Pikmin and pretty much everyone except probably the player character at this point, and Colin always calling him out on like, hey, maybe that's not ethical or whatever. But you learn a lot about like the glow Pikmin that way. Yanni's dialogue's also funny to me when it's the stuff with like doing the nighttime expeditions or whatever. What else? And then the ranger, I think his name's like Dingo. I thought he was going to be kind of annoying, but he's actually also kind of funny in that a lot of his dialogue that's like, the kind of thing where you're like hearing someone's thoughts, where he like tries to be tough, but he actually does like being needed by you a little bit, but then also glad of sometimes like, oh, when you're able to handle yourself. But I mean, he does get to prove himself if you do get to use the get help thing, because the characters are always messing with him at the beginning of like, hey, you should help out the player character. Are you like healthy enough to help them and stuff, because that's like your job or whatever. But then okay, anyway, but yeah, the ranger does get to help you if you press the get help thing, which I did end up using finally when I got to the final nighttime expedition thing, which you don't actually get to see him do anything. You just get like a dark screen and dialogue about it or whatever, but then he clears it, so he is kind of worth his weight. I'm trying to think of the right analogy or saying or whatever, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like, he can prove himself. It's just, you know, if you don't use the get help option, you do everything yourself, then he kind of doesn't do anything. But I did think that was funny that he like tries to come off tough, and I mean, he is, but like, he doesn't mind being needed. I don't know. Okay, let me think. Who else is there? Shepard, I thought was gonna have a bit more in terms of like variety of dialogue, because I thought, oh, okay, this is like the main captain whose job is like to stay behind and kind of lead everyone and everything. But then all of Shepard's dialogue isn't really about like being captain or anything. Like, literally most of it is just about dogs. But I totally get it, because it's the whole thing in her family about like they raise the pups, and that's like where Ochi comes from, of the generations of like rescue pups, they're officially called, which I find really interesting when you meet the final boss and its connection to like Ochi and Moss, but I'll talk about that later. But yeah, all of Shepard's dialogue is about dogs, even when it's like the nighttime stuff, or when the characters, I think it's Colin or something, asks about like, what are your hobbies? And it's all just entirely about Ochi. Even like when you get to talk to her and you think it's not going to be about like the training or whatever, so it does get like a little annoying. I'm like, this is supposed to be the character that's captain. I feel like there should be a bit more, especially because the other characters get like other things to talk about or other traits. So that was a little bit disappointing. Who else is there? I think Bernard's like the last one you rescue, the pilot. I thought he was cool. I kind of wish we could have gotten his like aviator sunglasses. I actually do kind of wish you could have gotten accessories from the other Rescue Corps characters, because like sometimes you can do that in games with like the ability to dress up. I mostly wanted those glasses though. I thought they looked cool. I remember he has this character tick. I know some of them do, like the doctor having a specific laugh, or I think Bernard's was like every once in a while he'd say something that was like in all caps, but it wouldn't match like the context of the sentence, so it was just kind of weird. I don't know, I didn't find it amusing. But I liked that his mission thing, like his little side mission thing, was just hey, you should rescue everybody and stuff. And how the other characters will talk about like how he actually is a great pilot, but the ship kind of was sort of forced to crash anyway, and just the whole thing of like so much lore you find out in this game about the planet, I guess, luring people in, and that's why so many of them crash here and everything. Or some of the stuff I learned in the treasure stuff was interesting, or the Piclopedia, because I never really remember to read it for the other games, and I kind of regret that. I might have to do that with 3 before I give it back, actually. But I think I could probably do that with my own copy too. Anyway, I think one of the characters, it's probably Olimar, something mentions of like, oh, the Pikmin turning people into leaflings could be their way of forcing them to stay to like get a permanent leader and everything, and that might have been why Olimar was like the first one to have that done, besides the fact that he like literally like died and they revived him as a leafling. That was supposed to be like a save your life thing, but then for everyone else, you know, they were gonna live, but they were turned into leaflings against their will. But it's kind of a little dark in terms of like the Pikmin themselves. Yeah, I think that's the whole Rescue Corps. And then Olimar and Louie, I want to talk about in some of the bosses and stuff. Oh yeah, in terms of bosses, I want to get that out of the way. In terms of like designs and actual fights and stuff, I liked the final boss, which I will talk about, but I think my favorite in terms of like new bosses and stuff, I really liked that disco version of the long legs. That was crazy. I think I'd been spoiled about it though on the internet, which I was a little bummed about. I saw there was like an animation or something that just popped up to me on YouTube, and this was before I played Pikmin 4, mind you. of that enemy, so I think I kind of knew about it, but I thought that was crazy. Apparently the lights on it, I was reading it yesterday in its entry, are actually its eyes. It just happens to have like 16 eyes that make it look like a disco ball, and that's pretty crazy. I actually love how like just alien and bizarre the enemies in Pikmin look, both like the regular enemies and the bosses, especially in this game too. I feel like they kind of get more weird and stuff. I always think that's really cool. Or like the final boss in the third game is one of my favorites because I don't know what the hell it is. It's just, and neither do any of the characters. The fact that Louie's scared of it and he doesn't seem scared of like any other thing in this game is, in this series, is still like crazy to me. But actually no, there is one thing he's scared of, which is kind of fun, or at least felt like it was hinted that way, because like with the enemy in 3, the final boss, he ends up running away from it, and that's how you find him early. And then I noticed his entry for the water bath is something along the lines that like the wording of it basically seems to translate to like you see it for the first time and you shit your pants and run. I forgot what he said, thundering bowels or whatever, and muscle cramps. Like, literally, he writes that it's inedible. I mean, its body's supposed to be, but, like, damn, dude, this is Louis we're talking about. But yeah, I like the disco long legs thing. I thought it looked pretty cool. And the music for it is crazy. It feels like an anxiety attack kind of a vibe. It's so like in your face and everything, but it's also just a really good track. In terms of music, the final boss track and having the guitars and actually being rock was also cool. Music in this game as a whole was really good, honestly. I probably need to listen to it more. I wasn't really listening in the main areas because I was talking and doing my commentary, but I also didn't have the volume super high, and I kind of regret that because I feel like Pikmin is like a different experience, and sometimes for games in general, if you're like listening to the music as you're in the worlds and everything. Okay, Olimar and Louis, that's what we're gonna go with. Yeah, it's interesting that you actually find Olimar as like a right before the credits thing, when I actually did think the game was gonna end, and I was like, why is there no final boss fight? Is there gonna be like no more areas or whatever? And just this whole thing of like you get to play as him in the Olimar's Shipwreck Tales or whatever, and you get the story of like how he's there, because I do like it's a lot of a mystery in the game. Like you play as him in the prologue, he gets taken away, and then suddenly you're on a character collection screen and you're a rescue corps person, and then you end up finding Olimar later and you're like, how does he have moss? I wondered about moss throughout the game, because it's interesting. Ochi ends up being, Ochi is a rescue pup who gets leafified, and I think it's said in an entry somewhere that the Pikmin being around them literally like changes your DNA or something, and that's what's supposedly made Ochi have like the little leaf tail, even though he wasn't sent into the onion or anything. But then Moss is said to have been like a leafling pup her entire life or something, so she literally can never leave the planet. But I think it did work out in terms of the game's ending, because you see Moss with the Pikmin. So I guess the Pikmin, if their goal throughout the game, you could say, is like trying to get a permanent leader, because Olimar's not going to stay with them. They ended up getting Moss, and the dogs work the same, kind of as like as if they were like one of the spaceship captains or anything. So that's kind of nice for the Pikmin that it worked out, and Moss kind of takes that role to them, because like when you first meet her, she's in Olimar's mode. She's, I think, like injured in the first area or something, so that's kind of nice. And then the whole thing with the final boss too, I want to actually talk about the doggies and stuff, and then getting back to talking about Olimar and Louis, because it all connects and everything. The boss being that giant dog, I thought it was going to be something that was kind of similar to a dog. That's crazy to me. Like the fight was actually really fun. It reminded me more of like a Kirby or Mario fight, rather than like, it feels like it would have been a fight in like Mario Odyssey or something, rather than like Pikmin. Normally it's like things are trying to stomp on you and whatever, but the dog is running around and making all these elemental things and whatever. It was actually kind of cool. The music for it was badass. And the fact that it's just this dog, because like every other creature, you know, they have weird abilities, maybe they evolved in the planet, but the fact that there's just a dog that's able to like shapeshift like elementally, and it's described as being ancient and whatever. The things I'm wondering about it is it has a collar, that, and it's a really big collar. That has to mean that like a human probably put it on there. I'm assuming this dog has lived its entire life on Earth or something. And it's like, who owns this thing, you know? Because, I mean, it looks huge in the game, but remember, everyone is small, so that means that to us, to humans and stuff, it's, which that feels so funny whenever I mention about that in this, I'm realizing of like us humans, and I remember, oh yeah, my mascot's literally just a little cotton mouse. But anyway, the dog, you know, isn't like the size of like an actual dog. That's why I said, I was kind of half kidding though, saying it's probably like the size of a Chihuahua or something. You know, because those are pretty small dogs to us, but like to the Pikmin, they'd probably be gigantic or whatever. But yeah, it has to belong to someone. It has the collar. I was wondering during that fight, you know, because after you beat Louis, the collar comes off, Louis gets off the dog. And I was wondering, okay, is it the collar or is it Louis that's controlling it? Because that's the whole thing related to 2, is like in the entries and everything, it seems like, okay, Louis is like controlling the final boss of the second game, the Titan Devil, rather than it like taking him captive and trying to protect him and stuff. And it's only stuff related to Louis that seems that way. Like with the third game, Olimar's kidnapped by the final boss, but like Olimar is unconscious the whole time. You know, he wouldn't attack the captains, you know, unless, you know, in his normal state of mind, because I remembered he gets turned into a leafling. But the you can see it's the behavior of the final boss of that game. It's the way it like strokes Olimar. It puts him on a little leaf thing. It's like babying him or whatever. I was gonna say babifying, and then I'm like, that's not a word. No, it's like babying him or something, which I still always wonder about. I love that creature is like a mystery, honestly. So, you know, it really is trying to protect Olimar, but then the bosses with Louis, it's like, no, I'm pretty sure he's controlling them. So that's the thing, which I thought that was a nice callback of like Louis on top of the big dog in 4, but it made me wonder, like, because its eyes turn back to normal, the red eyes, and it attacking you isn't like a normal thing, because like you see in the credits and everything that it its eyes turn back to being blue, and it's not actually trying to harm the Pikmin or anybody. So I was wondering, like, the spiky collar, is the collar in general hurting it? I mean, the spikes aren't pointing inwards. It is a pretty cool collar, but I thought like maybe having the collar was making it freak out, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Louis, which is also funny to me because when reading the entries, whenever there's any kind of dog-like entity, Louis, even the photo of like the hyper-realistic dogs and everything, Louis mentions about wanting to ride them and saying that riding dogs is fun. So I don't know, but yeah, I wonder about that dog, especially because the big one, the big boss, because the characters and even the entries mention of like, okay, Ochi and Moss are probably related to this thing, and it feels like it was implied like that the ancestors of this ancient dog ended up in space and evolved to the point where it became like the rescue pups or something, and the whole existence of Moss being like the leafling pup. I mean, the giant dog doesn't have like a leaf tail or anything, but like Moss is kind of almost like a rescue pup, but like being adapted to Earth. So it's just a whole thing that raises a bunch of questions. But I find that really interesting, because I mean, we know there's like modern humans, like Earth is not this isn't Kirby where it's implied that like Earth there's no more humans or anything, yeah, with like Shiver Star and anything. With this, it's like there's obviously humans around and stuff. You go inside of a house and everything, and we know that humans have been to space. So does this mean like we're leaving dogs somewhere and it's evolving into the dogs the characters get to use? What does that say about the little humanoids we play as in the game or whatever? Like in some of the treasure entries, they even wonder about that, of like, you know, our civilizations are so similar, like the treasures and what things are used for. Like, even though the characters sort of don't they know what dogs are, but not recognizing dogs like how we have dogs and what their treasures are used for. They get a lot of their speculation right in the entries, where it's like, where did these little guys come from or whatever. It's kind of interesting to think about. But yeah, back to Olimar and Louis, and I'm still thinking about the treasure entries. I want to talk about that as well, because I didn't do commentary on it, but it raises a lot of interesting points about things. Like Louis, for example, is a character. My opinion of him has changed. I want to talk about Louis first before Olimar, because I feel like more of the story is focused on him here. Like my first game, like I said, was 3, where he shows up for a little bit, he takes your juice. I was kind of angry at him forever, of like, that little bastard, and that's a lot of people's view on him, and I still view him that way. But let me continue. And then that's it, and he's kind of not really involved in the story anymore. And then I played 2, where you're forced to rely on him. I didn't even really think of him much as a character, because, you know, him and Olimar don't talk to each other or anything, and you're just swapping between the two, and it's whatever. It didn't really change my opinion on Louis. I just thought, oh, I need this second captain, but I just viewed him as like another captain, not really as like, oh, Louis helping us or whatever. You know, he's just doing his job, and then he gets left behind in the credits, and his backstory and related to that is just interesting to me. And you read about it in the entries and stuff, like the president, I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, is his dad or something, and that's why he goes to rescue Louis, because he's like trying to rescue his son. But then it's said that like Louis pretty much raised by his grandmother, his nana, I think maybe even from like being a baby, because I remember some of the entries in 4, the treasure stuff, there's like the whole maternal series, and he mentions about like her singing lullabies, or there's one, the maternal structure, the one that's like the little nipple looking thing that goes on baby bottles, and he mentions about associating that with Nana or whatever. But then his Nana was the one that like had him eat bugs, and I don't think like treated him well. He still seems to view her fondly, of some of the treasures he mentions of like, oh, this would be a great gift for Nana or whatever. But yeah, that gave his backstory, or his upbringing, I guess, gives him the ability to survive anywhere, because he has to survive on 2. That's actually one of my favorite credit sequences, actually, of like watching Louis in all these environments, trying to survive and just kind of chilling and stuff. And I feel like that kind of shaped his character, because then you get, you know, you rescue him in 2, he's controlling that creature. Maybe he can talk to bugs or something, and you take him back. And then in 3, he lands on the planet, steals your juice, goes off to explore. Like, he never actually ever seems to want to come back. And then you find him in 4, which is kind of sad. It's like a thing you don't even see on screen, of like he steals the Kopite's juice again and leaves them to starve again, even though it's different characters. And then with 4, it's that he's running around with Moss. I do like that Louis pops up in the credits again, before you get to go to like Giant's Hearth and everything, and finds Moss, and Moss immediately is interested in him. And that's probably kind of nice, that like Louis does seem to like riding dogs. I remember one of the entries, I think the one for Moss, says something of like, when I first met a dog, I thought it was going to eat me. But he seems to actually genuinely like Moss, which is nice. And then from there, he's going around kidnapping people. And I think and I didn't even view this as like, oh, he's being a shithead kind of moment, like with the juice. You know, obviously it's that way. Because the characters mention of like, oh, he's just copying Olimar and stuff, of Olimar literally telling him like, do what I do, and Louis taking that literally, because he's seeing Olimar as a leafling and not understanding it, and kidnapping people and being like, okay, we're kidnapping people too, I guess. So that's kind of interesting. And then you end up and then he ends up going inside of the dungeon or something, and, you know, leaving Moss, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, and then they mention about his Dandori skills too, of like, oh, why is he suddenly so helpful and stuff, and Olimar having that dialogue of like, oh, he's doing things in his own way, and asks you like to forgive Louis, which I find kind of interesting, especially because they're not like friends or anything. Like Olimar mentions about like Louis not being very helpful in general, and not really talking to each other. Louis doesn't really have a lot of dialogue with anyone. It's just like a very quiet fellow, but still wanting you to forgive him, and saying like deep down he is probably a good person. Like Olimar does believe in him, and wondering where Louis' sudden Dandori skills come from. I don't know. What was I gonna say? And I think him being not a good employee and also his interests in things are interesting when you read the treasure entries. Like, that ended up making me like Louis more, because I didn't really read them in 2. I only read like Olimar's. The entries are so funny because it's like 3 entries. It's by the guy that is in charge of the treasure, and then Olimar's and Louis, and the treasure guys, I'll call him, and Olimar's are usually very similar entries, because I went in order of reading through all the treasure stuff, where it'll be like similar ideas and feelings on different things, where the treasure guys is kind of just more broad and a little more romanticized on things in general, and more based on like feelings. And a lot of Olimar's entries in the beginning are specifically related about his family. I always find Olimar's family interesting, because throughout the game, throughout the series, he's always mentioning about wanting to go back to his family, and a lot of the entries are really sweet about how it's memories of him with his wife or memories of him with his kids, and you learn a lot of his backstory with his family and himself and everything, and I thought that was really cool. But then the entries are also about like how he wants to go back to his family and he misses them, but also about how he genuinely does enjoy exploring this planet with the Pikmin and going into the caves and looking for treasure and stuff, and how his job's kind of stressful, and how he wanted to like also have adventure in his life. So he doesn't view like crashing here so many times completely as like a bad thing. Like, he does always want to go back home, but it is the fun of getting to go on an adventure, because his normal job is just like space delivery, basically, like I mentioned, of working with the president or for the president and everything. So it's probably nice for him when he crashes here, he gets to like go on an adventure, even if it's like life-threatening and stuff. And he seems to view things, Olimar, what is it called? The glass half full thing and whatever. And I think that's probably a good perspective to have and stuff. What was the other thing I was going to say? But yeah, it's interesting reading his entries because of that, of sort of this double life in a sense of like his stuff with his family, but then also enjoying the adventure stuff, especially because with 2, you learn some things about his wife. Like, I remember there's an entry where the president is having dinner with your wife and complaining about her cooking, and meanwhile we're risking our life in the second game trying to find treasure to save his company because he's the one that got it bankrupt and everything. And then the president goes through a whole character arc about viewing things in a more positive way, and I like how there's still references to I actually like the president as a character, especially when you get to play as him as well, and where he's like forced to go find like Louis and everything. And then the characters are constantly referencing the president, even in like 3 and 4 as well. Like, Olimar will find things that like visually look like the president. Like, there's one thing in 3 in like the snow level that literally looks like the president's face or something, and a lot of his entries about work and the president are like negative and stuff. I think that's more of like the negative thing of his job, is like his boss being like really greedy, and that's what makes me feel bad for Olimar, because this whole thing, and you see him work so hard playing as him in the games, he just wants to go back to his family. And the president is the one that's constantly sending him back, is the thing. I think more often than Olimar crashing on the planet. Like, in 3, it's funny because he mentions about, like, before you get to play as him, of like, yeah, these kind Cokebite scientists, they saved me from the final boss, and I get to finally go back to my family. And then it's revealed the president immediately sent him back, and then he crashed, and you have to find his ship parts again and do all these little missions or whatever. And it sounds like the president's constantly sending him back to, like, sounds more like looking for treasure than anything else. And it's interesting when you hear the perspective of some of the people of these planets from like other planets, where they mention that the people on Olimar's planet are like really greedy, and which it's not like all of them that are like that. Like, Olimar doesn't really seem to be, like, when you read about the treasure, like, he does talk about, like, oh, some of these things are, like, gems or whatever, but he doesn't talk about them in, like, a monetary value. It's more so of, like, oh, his daughter likes the finer things in life, like buying jewelry for, like, his wife and kid, or maybe using the money to support his family. it's just the other two that are greedy. Like, Louis' entries are so funny to me. About some of them are just like, oh, I wonder how much this thing would sell for, and we all know how greedy the president is, or the people in Pikmin 3, the Copites, being like fussy eaters, referencing like they only eat like juice or whatever, and now their planet's on like the brink of starvation. But yeah, sorry, I'm like kind of losing track of my brain of where I'm going with this. But yeah, Olimar's entries, I really like him as a character. It's funny because I only knew him from Smash Bros, and I'm like, who is this guy? But he really does care about his family. He's not like super greedy. He's even like nice to you when you like talk to him about stuff of like, I remember there's one part where he said of like how everything eventually works out, and that kind of stuck to me because at the time I was struggling really hard with those like white sage trials or whatever, and getting to play as him is pretty cool, where he's the one that tells you how to get to those trials and everything, and asking you to forgive Louis. And then yeah, Louis is kind of the more interesting character in a sense to me, where I do kind of feel bad for him of like his backstory is like a little bit sad of like the stuff with him, and it sounds like his grandma wasn't always like treating him well in the second game. And oh no, the thing I brought up with the second game, I'm sorry, to finish up with Olimar, I remember it sounds like he was getting into arguments with like his wife or something in the second game, and I felt kind of bad for him of that. But then the fourth one, he's always saying about like how much he loves her and everything. And anyway, with Louis, yeah, he always seems to just run away whenever he gets to like the Pikmin planet and stuff, and it's interesting. I'm still thinking about it. When you're finding him in the fourth dungeon, it's like one of the only times he talks, and he mentions about like wanting you to leave. At first I thought he was leading us to the giant dog or something, because he actually wanted to help like Ochi and Moss. I thought like, oh, maybe Olimar's right about him being a good person. He grew like emotionally attached to Moss, and maybe he's trying to lead you to the giant dog to like help, you know. But no, then he tells you like at one point of like, oh, just leave me alone or whatever. And he mentions about with the dogs about like how they're so comfy to ride and everything, and he wishes he can bring one back, and not really seeming to like talk to people or anything. You know, he's not a very social person, but clearly gets along more with like the creatures and the dogs and things. But yeah, and then you rescue him and he introduces himself, and he mentions something of like, I wish I could stay here, I wish I didn't have to go back. And I felt really bad for him at that point, because he's constantly running away from you, and you end up taking him by force, basically. Like, he ends up knocked unconscious, you tie him up. I think Nelly, it's implied she ends up like beating him up, which I find really funny and kind of satisfactory, because I wish Brittany could have done that in 3. It's kind of like finally getting that karma of stealing the juice and everything. But yeah, he doesn't want to go back. And you know what? I don't blame him, because the treasure entries, I forgot about it, but they're seen by the president. Olimar mentions about like, oh, I need to change this entry in case the president sees or something. And Olimar, you know, he's like their best employee and whatever, and he does write about his feelings and other things, but he does take the time to like sample the treasures and to test everything and whatever, because eventually the president has to sell them and stuff. You know, he's like doing his job. He's writing these as like reports for your boss. But Louis doesn't really seem to care about collecting the treasure. All of his I love Louis' entries. I need to just talk about that finally. Because like Olimar and the treasures guy, they're about like family or emotion, or they get really deep sometimes. They're interesting. That's part of the reason I wanted to make that video about the treasure stuff, the no commentary, because I find that stuff interesting, and then you can read through it too. Louis, he's trying out stuff with the treasures. First off, his writing style, it's only like 3 or 4 sentences, and it's actually kind of the way that I write in journals. It's really funny, of like just kind of very brief statements that could even just be bullet points, and he's just testing these things just to see what they're like, more out of curiosity. And a lot of the time it'll be like about food, or a lot of it's like cooking. Like, I think everything in his like the monster decks, as I'll call it, is how to cook the different enemies, except for the ones that he like physically can't eat. Though he does mention about holding it back of like trying to eat the Pikmin, which is a constant like thing in like the other games too, which is kind of a bit morbid because, you know, he's your second captain in the second game. But his entries with some of the other stuff is funny. Like I remember the one for the ring, the unbreakable promise. He mentions about going inside of the ring and taking a nap in there, and he's always crawling around and just kind of testing things, which is probably really fun because like for us, they're normal objects, but I can imagine if you're like the size of a penny and you saw human objects and you had no idea what they were. Like he mentions about the toothbrush of like calling the bristles of it like fur because it's like really soft, and reading his entries on a lot of like testing out the objects is just really amusing to me. But yeah, you read some things about his nana or stuff about the cooking, and the cooking thing made me wonder. I'm like, man, this dude is in the wrong field of work, honestly. Like he obviously hates his job. He's reports to the boss, which, you know, also I'm pretty sure is like his dad or something, aren't professional or anything. He doesn't really care about the job, and he's just kind of brought along by Olimar, and every time he's brought to the planet he just runs around and tries to leave, and in the fourth game he literally just does not want to go back. And you know, I bet you could just leave him behind, you know, and he'd be happy with it if, you know, the planet's stuff wasn't like toxic to him or whatever. It almost makes me wish that he became a leafling and stayed behind with Moss or something. He probably would have been fine with that. But I'm like, why can't he just get a job? You know how there's like the NPC characters and they all have different fields of like studying things on the planet and the side missions. Louis clearly knows more about food than anyone else, not just constantly giving like cooking instructions for every enemy and like object and whatever. But I noticed with a lot of the food objects, the other two characters like Olimar and the treasure guy mention of like, oh, this would probably be for a more sophisticated palate, and Louis' entry will be like, this is uncomplex and whatever, and just the way he describes food. And I'm like, why can't he get a job as, and it's probably because the president of like being the person who studies the food or something, and being the person for that for like this specific planet or whatever, like still going there with Olimar, and Olimar's doing his job, but like Louis collecting treasure and like writing things about the food and bringing it back home. I'm sure that could probably be some kind of job there or whatever, and it seems like it's something he like actually enjoys, and he, you know, it would give him the excuse to still be able to like go to the planet. I mean, he's forced to go anyway. He's obviously not really doing his current job or caring about it, and constantly not wanting to go back, probably because of like his nana and the president and the whole job and everything. It just makes me feel bad for him, because I'm thinking like if he could just, you know, he can't obviously live there, you know, because of survival reasons. Like no wonder he keeps running away and you keep having to drag him back. But like if he could just change his field of work a little bit, it would probably slightly improve his life. It makes me feel bad for him. Like I still view him as like the villain of the franchise for sure. I mean, besides the whole stealing juice thing, but also you know, controlling two of the final bosses in this game and like literally trying to kill you. Like for 4, I don't know, maybe he wanted to stay with the dog, but for 2 I can't think of another reason. I mean, unless it's just like, you know, he wants to stay behind so badly he's like literally willing to kill you for it. Especially like with the 4th game, you know, he's constantly yelling at you to like leave him alone or whatever. And Olimar is on the communication thing too, and is literally trying to talk to Louis like, hey, you should come back, you know. And like the characters aren't even really concerned with rescuing Louis. It's more of just like we have to save Ochi and stuff. And the funny thing is, I like Ochi. Ochi's adorable. I love the little dogs and stuff. But I was kind of whatever about saving Ochi, but like the characters are like so into it and stuff. I was kind of expecting to be able to save Moss too. I just assumed so, especially because like, okay, like you save Ochi's your character's partner and stuff, but like Moss grew to really like Olimar. Like when you rescue her and get her away from Louis, she's constantly with Olimar in like the overworld, and then he's forced to like leave her behind, and that was actually a little sad. And then she becomes like the leader of the Pikmin and everything in his place. But yeah, I wish Louis became a leafling and got to stay with Moss. That would have been nice. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on this. I didn't mean to make this like 2 hours, but there's just so many things in this game to talk about. Hell, there's probably things that I forgot about. My brain's kind of a little like, okay, I need to like stop at this point. But yeah, this game's really cool. I'm glad that even after the credits I checked it out, because there's new dialogue. You have like a mission from Louis about killing a specific type of bulbor. I don't know if that leads to any more dialogue. And the whole thing of staying behind to like make sure all the rescues are there and you get to like finish things up, which is really nice and everything. And then getting to look at the decks is nice at the end too, the like Piklopedia. Oh my gosh, wait, I forgot to talk about something. I'm sorry. The decor Pikmin, because I mentioned about the DLC. I think those were the two main things I remember that were added. I don't remember what else, because again, this was my only time playing the game. This is how I'm used to it. And it's just more of like a me thing to talk about here. I love the decor Pikmin. I already played Pikmin Bloom, and this does have to do with my 4 playthrough, by the way. And I deleted it a while ago because I wasn't really using it much. And then the Pikmin, were already part of the game by the time I played. It was actually really fun getting to look for them. It was like the one thing I used the survey camera for, which is like an actual little drone, which I liked using that. I like whenever the game's paused, the characters look like they're in like a little diorama or something. It's really cute, like the way they're modeled and stuff. But the whole environment and getting to see it from that bird's eye view is really cool. And even getting to see things in like out of bounds sort of areas that you physically wouldn't be able to get to is cool. But yeah, the decor Pikmin, they're great. It made me grow emotionally attached to the Pikmin. Not just the decor Pikmin, but like all of them. It's kind of the same way as like in Pokemon when I started doing Nuzlocke. And I mean, of course I was attached to my Pokemon before then. But I got into the habit during Nuzlocke to name Pokemon, and then I started doing that even when I was doing normal playthroughs. But for some reason, naming things makes them more attached, or like something that looks different, like if it's a shiny, if it's a different color. Or the decor Pikmin, they're literally just Pikmin. They don't get any abilities, but they have a cute little costume and whatever, and that's literally it. But it made them stand out in the crowd. I named them Ladybug, the one in the Ladybug costume that Olimar found scary or something, or whoever was in charge of the decor Pikmin thingy, the Declopedia, whatever, mentioned about it being scary, but only for a second. Yeah, because the Ladybug, I think, was the first one I got, and the one I got emotionally attached to the most. But yeah, the costumes are cool, and it made me more careful with the Pikmin overall, which is kind of funny. But finding them was fun, where you have to like go and take pictures of them. It's like the one thing you use the camera. I think that's what the camera is literally for, is just taking pictures of, but it's nice to take pictures of the Pikmin. You get their little entries, they like officially get names, and taking pictures of things. I didn't use it much in the main game. I don't even know if those get saved on the Switch, but it was kind of cool. It adds like a fun, more like customization thing. I actually liked having the camera, and when you can, I think 3 has a camera, you can take pictures of things as well, though I didn't ever do it. But I think that's fun for Pikmin, because I feel like there's not really a lot of games where you're tiny and you explore like the human world. This game reminds me of like Katamari and Chibi Robo in that sense, which I play a little bit of both of those, which are also like, I don't know what's with the GameCube having like 3 different games where you're like the size of a bug in the human world. But yeah, the camera and that aspect I think is cool, of really feeling that vibe of being tiny and everything. But yeah, the decor Pikmin were cool. There's 20 of them. It's not even anything related to the main story. It's just like a fun little thing added. But it got me back into playing Pikmin Bloom, and it's sort of a nice way for me to end this journey, because this entire channel has had all the Pikmin games and stuff, or at least the main ones. Like, I know I gained these subscribers, mostly after like October 2025 from all the Halloween videos, but if you look earlier on the channel, the first couple things on there, after the Banjo-Tooie video, is literally just Pikmin 1 and 2, which I can finally make a playlist for that. I didn't want to make it earlier because I didn't want to spoil of like, I'm coming back with Pikmin, but I've been playing Pikmin like this whole year basically, And it's been a really fun series overall. I'm not going to play any more Pikmin on here, but it's nice for me because I spent 4 games where the Pikmin are very much dying in every game, and then with 4 having the decor Pikmin and getting to use them and growing emotionally attached to them. And then finally with Bloom is like a nice way to actually end the series, where not only do I get the Pikmin live on my phone now and I don't have to give up the series, but also having it be the ones from 4 is really nice. You know, Ladybug does not have to keep dying anymore, and Bloom is nice where your Pikmin can't die. You don't get into battles like in Pokemon Go. It's just you walking around with Pikmin and you collect ones that can have little costumes, and that's pretty much it. And it's nice where I get a game to interact with Pikmin. It's like a little treat for the Pikmin in a sense. They died constantly throughout the main games, and now they get to live forever on my phone, where they get fed nectar and wear costumes, and they don't have to worry about a damn thing. It's like comparing Pokemon Arceus to like the main games. The Pokemon get to chill a little bit. But yeah, that's Pikmin 4. I guess that was a little bit also talking about the Pikmin games as a whole, except for 3. I do like 3, by the way. I have a soft spot for it from it being my first Pikmin game, but I did also get through it in like a week, and it's short, and I feel like there's not really a lot for me to say about it except for the captains. I don't know, compared to I find the other games more interesting, I guess. But I feel like I needed to talk about not just like my experience with all the Pikmin games, but it helps with 4 because there's so many things it draws from the first 2 games, but especially 2. Like I said, this is like Olimar's Tale is like an easier version of Pikmin 1, but Pikmin 4 as a whole is like an easier version of 2, basically, especially because they brought back the caves and stuff. And it's like a nice balance of both those games, where you have a lot of stuff in the caves, and the caves are easier, but then there's just as much stuff to do in the overworld. But it's also fun that like 4 is its own thing, where you have Ochi, which, like I said, I wish Ochi was more balanced. That's like my biggest problem with this game. Of even without the upgrades to Ochi, the puzzles and everything, the game is designed around Ochi. You kind of can't really avoid using him, and that's sort of a bummer because I feel like it takes away not just like the difficulty, but a lot of the strategy of Pikmin. It kind of bothered me, but I understand why Ochi's there in the first place. And what else? But then also having like the Olimar's Tale thing, but it also relates to the story, because a lot of the story once again is about pretty much just like Olimar and Louis rather than more of like the rescue corps. And then having the nighttime expeditions of like, hey, you finally get to go around at night and you get to defend these towers. It's like a new mode, basically. And then the whole thing with Dandori battles and challenges, which again, I wish there was more battles. They're really fun. But the challenges, are actually challenging. So that's the thing. Like the main story overall is like pretty easy. The bosses are really easy except for the freaking Emperor Bullbacks, but that might just be me. I don't know. Where I wasn't even using like items or anything until that boss. The final boss is really fun, and I like the design just being this giant dog that I still am curious about. And also the Dandori challenges especially, I think, are like the big thing with this game. But I can see why people were excited about it when it first came out, of like, we're finally getting Pikmin 4, and I can understand if people, I think from what I've read, people do have like mixed opinions on this game, where they either really like it or really don't like it. I loved it. I thought it was really fun. I had a great time with it. It was way longer than I expected, because I heard before I played it was really easy, so I thought, oh, I'm gonna get through it faster than 3. And if I had known that before I played, that I was going to sink, I'm not kidding, like 50 something hours into this, which is almost as much as like how I have for like Mario or Kirby or something, compared to the games I have to play that I borrowed from my friend. Like I'm currently playing Shantae, and I'll start Luigi's Mansion in a while too, with those, most of the games I borrowed being a lot shorter. I would have started with those. I would have waited on Pikmin. I still would have played 3 before 4. Like, I wasn't even going to play 3 in its entirety. I was just like, I'm a little nostalgic for 3. But 3's so short. You go through it so fast, and then you get to 4, I think that's what I do like. I feel like 4, if they don't make any more Pikmin games, like mainline ones, you know what, with the way 4 turned out, I'm happy with that. Like 3 was a nice change of pace, and everything, but 4, you know, it had so much content to it. The fact that it got DLC like a year later or whatever, and or not really DLC, but you know, the free update, that's cool. And you know, that it gives more stuff about like Olimar and Louis and the whole Rescue Corps thing and all these new modes and stuff. I think that's pretty good. But yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with this game. This video is also not just like 4, but also like okay, I'm done with Pikmin on this channel. You know, I don't have a way to record my 3DS, so even if I did play Hey Pikmin, you wouldn't get a playthrough of it on here. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I know this was like 2 hours, sorry about that, but this game has so much content, as you know. And I'm also going to post this also May 31st. I know there's a lot of videos on that day, and then it immediately hops to Shantae the next day, but yeah, I needed this to be like the very last. I feel like it was good to have this the same day as like the video for the Pikmin boss and after the treasures and everything, because I needed to talk about those. But yeah, the entry for Louis for the treasures and stuff, that made me like him more as a character. But the entries are just fun and really funny in that Olimar's and the treasure guys are like so deep. I wish I could remember specific ones right now, and Louis are just so completely different. It's really funny. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.